Now available in paperback and e-readers, Isis, Amari's Revenge. The goddess next door is confronted by a Nubian queen out for revenge at the Metropolitan Museum of Art in this inaugural Isis series adventure. Get your copy of Isis, Amari's Revenge in paperback and e-readers at Amazon.com and online booksellers everywhere. We really need more PG-13 and all ages comics in comic shops. Now, I was online looking at all of the new comics that were currently on the market, and it basically disturbed me to see so many comics featuring a lot of adult content and a lot of content that featured gore and blood and guts. And it basically disturbed me because most of these books are what's on the market right now, and what's on the market right now, whether it be at the comic shop or at many of the independent crowdfunded comics, isn't the kind of book that's really going to get that large following from average everyday readers that the comic book industry needs in order to try to get itself back on track. And that's the big problem I have been seeing with many comic creators, is that they're going out here creating a lot of comics that basically are either R-rated with nudity and violence, just like I Like It, and books that basically are filled with a lot of blood, guts, and gore. But these books basically are not moving the needle in the right direction as related to getting comic book sales back to the place they were in the 1970s and 1980s and the early 90s, when comic books basically were on their way to becoming everyday reading, and people anticipated picking up those brand new comics every Wednesday from comic book stores or places like when I used to go. There was a cigar store I used to go to in college to pick up my comics, and vendor stands that I used to go to after I was finished with my classes. And when I was in high school, I used to go to a newsstand in Times Square and stores like Forbidden Planet. Now, these days, most comics are usually sold in comic book stores, and if you can get that kind of distribution, and many comic book stores are closing, and a lot of those stores, I believe, are being forced to close, mainly because the content that's being produced just isn't appealing to casual customers or give them an incentive to come into a comic book store to pick up those comics or try them out. Now, comic book stores have a real negative stigma as being places that are considered to be antisocial. That's the way it was back in the 1980s when I used to go to comic shops like Forbidden Planet, and in the 90s used to go to shops like Jim Hanley's Universe to pick up comics on the regular when I had money. I mean, a comic shop basically for the average everyday person was considered to be an uncomfortable space, but for a lifelong comic fan like myself, it basically felt like an oasis in the jungle of New York City. And it felt like an oasis in the jungle of New York City because it was a place where a guy could go to relax and just enjoy seeing all the new comics, or go and see many of the old back issues. That's what a comic book store used to be. And one of the things that basically fueled a lot of the foot traffic that basically helped a comic shop make most of its money was that much of the content was basically all ages, and it had a basically PG-13 level as related to content. That's one of the reasons why a lot of people basically felt safe about going into comic shops like myself, who have been lifelong comic fans. And the other is that when you have a lot of PG-13 and family-friendly content, basically this incentivizes many young kids to be able to feel comfortable about coming to a comic book store and looking to go out here and peruse the new issues, not to mention go looking into the back issues of previously published comics that have basically gone out of print. When it comes to comic shops, they really need a lot of PG-13 and all ages comics on the shelf. They need this content because this is the kind of content that basically drives a lot of the foot traffic into the store, not only from the regulars, but it mainly drives the foot traffic of most of the younger customers. The younger customers are the ones that the comic book industry has basically not been targeting with its business over the last, I say, 25 to 30 years. And that's why the whole situation is dire, because they've basically become so insular that they're focused on their older regulars, but not thinking about trying to target the much younger customers. And the younger customers are really where all the money is, and that's why manga is beating the crap out of the modern comic book industry, because manga is mainly focused on the younger customer, and they're mainly focused on the younger customer by providing them with all ages content that is mostly PG and PG-13 as related to the terms of the content. And that's the content that basically drives a lot of the sales for the entire comic book business. And that's one of the reasons why I'm a major supporter of the Comics Code, because the Comics Code basically drove the comic book business. It was a standard set by all of the publishers that basically said that the content would be safe for all ages, and that standard basically made it where people felt comfortable about sharing their comics with their children, with their friends and family. And sadly, we don't have that standard anymore. And because we don't have that standard to create PG and PG-13 content in comic books, this is one of the reasons why the industry has taken a further decline, even in the aftermath of movements like the Comicsgate movement, which was supposed to revolutionize comics. It was supposed to revolutionize comics, but it basically went nowhere. And it went nowhere because many of the people who create comics didn't understand what I, as a comic book publisher and a publisher of trade paperbacks, understand. I understand if you want to reach a large audience of readers, what you need to do is create a lot of content that is usually all ages, or PG-13 to a level. Now, PG-13 means that you can basically, again, you can put your violence in the comic. You can even put some adult situations in the comic, but it's something that is a standard that basically means that this content is safe for people under the age of 13, and those people and those kids can basically feel safe. Moreover, their parents can feel comfortable about the kids picking up this content, and that's the standard that I believe comics really need to go back to, because if you want to reach that larger audience of readers, the people who drive the foot traffic into comic book stores, the people who drive the foot traffic into bookstores like Barnes & Noble, or go out here and put in orders for books like those on Amazon, you really need to create a standard for content where people feel safe about picking up material. You really need to have a standard that makes people feel comfortable and safe about picking up content and not having to deal with any sort of things that are disturbing, such as graphic sexual content and graphic nudity and graphic blood, guts, and gore. I mean, this is the kind of stuff that basically turns off a lot of the casual customers, where the money really is, especially with the young casual customer. The young casual customer, basically, they want to go out here and try material, but they're afraid they won't be able to either, one, be able to get it in their house and their parents see it, or two, be able to share that content. That's what a lot of kids basically feel about certain material, and having that material basically makes them feel like this material is antisocial. It's because the behavior in some of these characters is just sick and depraved. So this is why manga is basically gaining ground, because we don't have those PG-13 comics that are all ages accessible, and because we don't have those PG-13 comics, this is a reason why a lot of comic shops are closing, because comic shops need to be able to make money on content. Now, a lot of these comic shop owners, they buy these comics and they're not returnable, and they're stuck with these comics because there's no foot traffic coming in. No foot traffic coming in because people feel uncomfortable about coming to comic shops. They don't feel like it's a safe place. And when they see the books on the rack, they basically feel like they are extremely uncomfortable, again, with these kind of books that basically, again, have all this blood, guts, and gore, or this graphic adult content. They feel uncomfortable the same way people feel about a sex shop. And that's one of the reasons why comic shops are closing, because it feels more like the sleazy environment of a sex shop and not like the comfortable space that I used to go to, like Forbidden Planet. When I was a teenager, I used to go to Forbidden Planet on 14th Street or 12th Street in Union Square. And it was, again, I could spend an hour in that shop or 2 hours in that shop just basically looking at all the awesome comics and all the awesome toys. And I also even went to the 59th Street Forbidden Planet when it was around back in the 80s. Again, very comfortable spot. You basically felt safe there. And Jim Hanley's Universe in the 1990s, back when they had this shop across the street from the Manhattan Mall, also known as the A&S Plaza at the time, that was a fantastic shop. I mean, that shop was huge. I mean, it just was just very bright and open, and you just felt like you could just spend the entire day there just chilling out and enjoying all the comics. I mean, that was one of the things that I used to love about going down to 34th Street. I mean, you just get off the D train, you go over to the Manhattan Mall and do a little shopping, then you go across the street over to Jim Hanley's Universe and check out all the comics and all the toys. I mean, that was a blast for me in my 20s. I mean, I loved going to that shop, and that's the type of experience that I wish kids could enjoy regarding comic shops. I mean, that's what they're missing as related to things. And one of the reasons why they're missing that experience is because of the missed opportunity that Disney blew with the MCU as related to bringing people into stores, because they decided to publish the all-new, all-different Marvel and those token diversity characters. That's one issue that basically drove a lot of people off the road to go into comic shops, and the opportunity that they missed. The other was the ongoing just content just going down this either what I call the R zone or the X-rated zone, and that basically started making people look at comics as something not that everybody could enjoy of all ages, but something that basically seemed like it was antisocial, because seeing people getting decapitated basically on every page, or seeing people being cut to pieces, that's not something that really gets people excited about picking up a comic and sharing that comic with their friends. And seeing people participating in graphic sex scenes, that's something that people really don't get excited for. And people really, if you really want to get that large base of customers, you really need those PG-13 and all ages comics, the kind of comics that many creators these days basically frown on. I mean, a lot of comic creators frown on making that kind of content, but as a publisher of books, I'm one of those guys who basically enjoys making all ages content, because I want people of all ages and all walks of life to be able to enjoy my stories. So that's when I go out here and I make books in things like the SJS Direct Universe. I always these days focus on making most of these books basically PG-13 at the most, and make them all ages at the least, because I want to reach the largest audience of customers. I want to provide the largest audience of customers with content that they can relate to, and I want to make the kind of content that people feel comfortable about sharing with their families and children. And this is what I've been doing for the last 15 years on the SJS Direct imprint, and it was what I want to do as related to creating comics. Now, sometimes I do dark material, like I did with the John Haynes at Death's Door comic, but that comic is basically PG-13, and there's no graphic nudity, there's no graphic violence, and I just tell a fun story. I just tell a fun story because what I want to do is basically make all ages family content. I want to make the kind of content that basically gets people excited for picking up those books and anticipating them. I want to make the kind of content that people just enjoy reading, and I want to go out here and get those casual readers and get people who never read a comic to come into a comic shop. That was always my goal as a publisher, was trying to, if I did do more comics, I want to make the kind of content that basically gets people excited for coming to the comic shop on Wednesday. I want to make the kind of comics that are fun and accessible to everyone. I want to make the kind of stories that basically people of all ages can enjoy and feel safe about having these books on the coffee table or the kitchen table, because comics, as I see it, don't need to be in a plastic bag. They need to be on the table with bends and creases and need to be read. That, to me, is a comic that's basically loved, is one that's basically read and enjoyed time and time again. That's the kind of comic that I want to produce. That's the comic I'm passionate about. I want to make the kind of comics that can get people excited every Wednesday. And I wish that we had that kind of creator with that kind of passion as related to comics, because they've got that in manga. Manga has people with that kind of passion, and that's why manga is still continuing to do well and now making inroads into modern comics, even in the aftermath of the Comicsgate boom that came and went. I mean, the Comicsgate boom basically came and went because too many creators basically are creating a lot of R-rated content and a lot of content with a lot of adult situations. Now, this will get a project possibly crowdfunded, but it's not going to be able to build momentum and really get those casual readers and those casual customers. That's what you need to, again, get comics back on track. We need a focus on PG-13 and all ages content that basically makes people feel safe that say, hey, if I pick this book up, I can share it with my kids. If I pick this book up, I can share it with my family. If I pick this book up, I can go out here and basically have it on a coffee table or a kitchen table, and people can feel comfortable about picking this up, checking it out, and once they see how great the stories are, go out here and pick up more books. That's what we need in the business, but sadly many creators, they want to feel that it's their right to make blood, gore, and guts, but sadly they don't see that that a lot of the sales out here really is with more centered, family-centered content that's PG-13. That's where the money is. That's where people feel safe. That's where you can build the momentum at Comic-Cons and build the momentum at comic shops. And this is what would stop many comic shops from losing money. Now, a lot of comic shops have switched over to action figures and video games and other forms of material. They switched over because they can't get the foot traffic from those young customers. They can't get that foot traffic from the younger readers. Now, those young readers are basically reading Scholastic comics, and again, Scholastic basically makes graphic novels that are all ages friendly, but the comic book business basically walked away from that audience because some creators basically feel, oh, kids are hokey, kids are meaning that I can't go out here and tell my kind of story. But the whole thing that they don't understand is you can tell great stories, you can tell compelling stories, and in a PG-13 environment, and you can really get creative and tell some really compelling stories. I mean, I was able to tell lots of great stories under the PG-13 standard and the all ages standard with the ISIS series, with the Esteem series, with the John Haynes series, and even made horror stories like Eternal Night, and made stories that featured some adult themes like Spellbound and the legendary Mad Matilda. I was able to tell those kind of stories and be able to reach a large casual audience all over the globe So it's possible, but again, a lot of creators, they don't want to take that risk, but they don't see the rewards that are out there, the rewards that are out there of reaching a larger audience of customers, a larger audience of customers that clearly there is an interest in superheroes and superhero material or comic book stories. There's an interest because people go to manga and read manga, but the whole thing is that the comic book industry is so caught up in people looking to appeal to older customers that they're leaving the younger customers behind, and leaving the younger customers that you really need in a comic shop, because in order for comic shops to make money, in order for bookstores to make money, you need the younger customer. And sadly, there's not enough material targeted at younger customers that's PG-13. Either we get dumbed down stuff that basically focuses on small children, or we get material that focuses on adults, but there's a big middle of adolescence that's basically being left behind. And adolescents basically want to learn about the world. That's one of the reasons why I read comic books as a kid and as a teenager, is because it gave me a nicer, larger perspective of the world. And we're leaving those customers behind, and manga is getting all those customers. And sadly, a lot of people don't really see the value of PG-13 comics and all ages comics, and I see the value in them, and I would love to do more all ages comics. I mean, I've written scripts for the ISIS series as related to stories like the Beauty Myth and stories like All That Glitters that I really would love to produce, like I did with John Haynes at Death's Door and Esteem No Good Deed, because in order for you to sell the other kinds of comics and get them a following in comic shops, you need the all ages PG and PG-13 comics that superhero comics and even Archie comics used to be. You really need to be able to try to reach those younger customers, and sadly we're not reaching those younger customers because we don't have a comics code, and we don't have a standard for comics. Don't have a standard for comics that basically assure the customer that they're going to be able to say, hey, if I give this book to my kids, they're not going to be exposed to antisocial behaviors or be exposed to things that are extremely graphic. We really need a standard that, again, ensures the customer, and that's what the Comics Code did. It assured the customer that the customer would be given something that was safe, to be able that they could have on their coffee table or their kitchen table or either child's bedroom. I mean, you want to be able to build that kind of trust, and that's something that I want to do here at SJS Direct, is basically try to build that kind of trust that you can pick up certain books, like the books like I do in the ISIS series or the Esteem series or the John Haynes series, or novels like Spellbound. Now, Spellbound's a kind of R-rated as related to the language, but there is no real sort of blood and guts or really extreme nudity in that book. Again, a book that I wrote for teens and tweens because I understand I have to dial down the content in order to bring up the sales, and you want to do that with your books. I mean, recently I had finished my new novel, Spinsterella Goth Girl Summer, and as I was writing the book, I was shocked because I thought I was going to write this and be R-rated, but this one basically became a PG-13 book, and I was happy to see it be a PG-13 book about Matilda going on vacation and working in the career as a goth model, and I was surprised because, again, I usually, again, write Spinsterella and other characters with a little bit more R-rated content with language. But the whole thing is, I was happy to see that this one was PG-13, and anybody could go out here and read it. It could be a safe book for kids, and you could feel comfortable about picking that book up and looking at the upcoming illustrations I've planned for this book. I mean, you could feel safe about picking up this book, and I was really happy that I wrote this to be PG-13. But when I look at comics, and I have to say to a lot of creators as related to their indie comics and even mainstream comics, I mean, if you really want to get the sales, you've got to really get back to PG-13 content. You've got to get back to family content. You've got to rebuild that trust with the customer. You've got to rebuild that trust, because what I read online basically disturbed me, because a lot of these comics basically are the same thing with the blood and guts. It just gets real repetitive, it gets real redundant, and it's just coming across as boring. And that's why manga is beating the crap out of comics, because we're not really getting that diversity of thought or that creativity and imagination. Because I've read a dozen comics with blood and guts. I've read a dozen comics with nudity and violence, just like I like it. But when it comes to the kids, I want kids to be able to find something that they like. And that's what we're not finding at the comic shops. We're not finding comics that basically bring children in and allow them to have their characters and their stories. That's what we're not finding. And it's a sad situation, because a lot of people, they may frown on PG-13 comics, but I would love to go out here and be able to produce PG-13 comics. I would love to again be able to go out here and do that kind of comic, because that's the kind of comic I want to produce, is something everyone of all ages can come and pick up. Everyone of all ages can come in and feel like, okay, I can have some fun. I can get an escape for a while with these characters and hang out with some friends. I can go out here and imagine a world that's much larger, and a larger world that's much fun. That's what I want to give to people as related to comics. That's one of the things I want to produce as comics. I want to produce those kind of comics, and I wish that more creators would really consider creating those kinds of comics, because those are the kind of comics that basically I would believe would turn the industry around from this whole horrible state of further decline, and allow us to have a new generation of readers go out here and find and discover comic books and what makes them really great. Now, my first full comic, John Haynes at Death's Door, is available on Lulu.com, and you can pick up your own paper copy over there, or you can go out here and pick up a digital version on Comixology or Kindle, along with my second digital comic, Esteem No Good Deed, which is available for 99 cents on Kindle. And you can also find that comic in the back of the Esteem series book, Esteem Blast from the Past. Now, if you want to check out much of my PG-13 and all ages content, you can find those books in the ISIS series, those books in the Esteem series, those books in the John Haynes series, and novels like The Temptation of John Haynes and Spellbound. You can find those books that are suitable for readers who are in the PG-13 area. You can find those books on Amazon.com in paperback and Kindle format. You can also find those books at other online booksellers like Draft the Digital, Google Play, Barnes & Noble, and big box retailers like Walmart and Target. And if you'd like to help me be able to get the next SJS Direct Universe comic or graphic novel out, or help pay for the covers for upcoming SJS Direct books, you can drop a donation to the Patreon, the PayPal, or the Cash App by clicking the links in the description box. That's all I have to say for this video. You can comment, rate, and subscribe. Now available on Lulu, John Haynes at Death's Door. The man who rules the world takes on the Greek god of death in this action-packed, all-new John Haynes comic book. Get your copy of the first John Haynes comic at Lulu.com today. Now available in paperback and e-readers, John Haynes' Illuminati. The man who rules the world takes on the head of the global elite in this all-new action-packed John Haynes series adventure. Get your copy of John Haynes' Illuminati in paperback and e-readers at Amazon.com and online booksellers everywhere. Now available in paperback and e-readers, Isis, Dark Incubus. The goddess next door gets enthralled in a romantic entanglement with an evil incubus in this all-new Isis series adventure. Get your copy of Isis, Dark Incubus in paperback and e-readers today. Support Black-owned and Black-operated digital broadcast media. www.niceradionetwork.com. Nice Radio Network, broadcasting 24 hours a day, 7 days a week.